Welcome to the Golf Coach Podcast. Nick, how you going, brother?
I'm feeling great. I've had a lovely day in the sun and hanging out with my mate Glenn Whittle, and it's been a really good day.
Hanging out with Glenn Whittle. Oh, there's a golf coach. Hey, tell me whereabouts in the sun were you hanging out?
Just out the front of my house in Bondi Beach, the Bondi Outdoor Gym.
Yes.
So we did some cold water, went in for a swim, and did some breath work, and came in, talked a bit of golf, did some meditation.
Yes. That was hanging out with Glenn?
Yeah.
Nice. So Glenn's in a bit of meditation, is he?
He's getting into it, yeah. I mean, we've been spending a bit of time together because he teaches at my range at Barton Park.
Yes.
And he's noticed, like, when I was a young kid, I was a bit of a hothead, and now I'm 40, I'm a lot calmer person and probably a little bit easier to relate to and ask some questions. And I said, I do this, this, and this, and come and hang out. And yeah.
That's cool. It's nice when people recognize that, right? Like when people see those differences in you.
It is nice.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen that often. It doesn't happen that often, but it is nice when it's noticed.
Have you spent much time in the East?
I've lived here for the last 8 years on and off. Yeah, I had one break away during COVID where things got pretty tough and went home to live with my mum. God bless her. Good Greek mum, making great. She lives in Mascot.
Okay. Yep. Nice. And what about when I mean the East? Sorry, I know you're on the East Coast there, but over in India, or have you done any meditation stuff overseas?
No, I had the fortune of being in a relationship with a lovely yoga teacher who introduced me to the benefits of yoga and meditation.
Oh, nice.
And I wish I had learnt it earlier.
I've spent many a months in India.
Have you?
Yeah, about 7 years ago, I stopped drinking, and just found myself in India, and I was sitting in front of the Dalai Lama teachings at Leh Ladakh about 9 months in, and just found Buddhism, and then got hooked on that for a while, and stayed in India for.
This is sounding like a Caddyshack story.
No, I stayed in India for months. I did a few
Wow.
trips.
You actually really were with the Dalai Lama. Wow.
I was. Yeah, I got video footage there, met him, all that stuff,
Wow.
and I wasn't going to come back. I was gone, and then I obviously came back, and now we're here on the Golf Coach Podcast. There's a little bit about that. People wouldn't know that about me. And my wife even asked me the other day. She said, "When are you going to go back to India?" Because it's one of my special places. I love India. I love it. I coach a few Indian tour professionals as well. Anyways, that's enough about that. Tell me. So where do you coach out of? What's it? Barton Park? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, Barton Park driving range in Arncliffe. It's around the corner from the international airport.
Yeah.
It's one of the best kept secrets in Sydney, I believe. We're one of the few driving ranges left with grass, and we use real balls and real old school range.
Yes. Oh, so you don't have like all the top tracer and all that technology in there?
I think Glenn brings in his TrackMan every now and again, and he has that there, and sometimes we'll share it. But no, just old school. Like in relationship to, like, when you go to Moore Park, they've got the signs, they've got the yellow balls, and it's very
Yes,
very different feel.
very corporate-y. So, all right, we'll get straight into kind of some technique stuff. I want to get a bit of background on you, and.
Sure.
In regards to your teaching method, I see your stuff, right? You do a bit of right-sided stuff?
Definitely, Gary Edwin was one of the first people that blew my mind when I had a lesson with him.
Yep.
And definitely incorporate the principles because they're very simple, very easy to understand. And when they're adopted, it's easy to get a player into position that I want them to get into. That makes sense?
Yes. So people listening to this, the right-sided golf swing, we had Baden Schaff on a few episodes below. If you guys go over listen to it, we went pretty deep into right-sided stuff as well, speaking about it all. And you get Baden started, and you can wind him up pretty quickly, and he just let him go about it.
Yeah.
So the right-sided golf swing. So if people are listening to this, about can you just name some Australian tour professionals that we might know that swings under Gary Edwin's?
Sure. Over the years, Peter Senior, Peter Lonard, Paul Gow, Scott Gardner, Rod Pampling, Rebecca Artis, I think now. Back in the day, it was Rebecca Flood.
Yep.
And Grant Dodd. there was a whole, at one point, there was a whole school of tour professionals.
It's crazy.
Yeah, there was a lot of people going.
And this was like, you know, as Baden put it as well, you know, this is what pre like social media, pre, you know, like online coaching, like everyone was just going to him because his players were getting results, right? And I tell you, the best ball striker I've ever seen live, and people, you know, don't even know, Taylor Cooper. I used to work with him at Manly Golf
Taylor,
Club.
yeah, he's great. Yeah, he's great. He's great. Oh,
I used
sorry,
to
I left
work
you
with,
out.
I used to
You're
work
on.
with Taylor. Sorry, what did you say?
Oh, I was just saying, sorry, Taylor, I left you out. But yeah, Taylor's pretty
Taylor's a
good.
gun, right? And I'll never forget, so my Taylor Cooper story, right, is so the right side of golf swing, we'll go a little bit of detail into it, is that people have a very good understanding of their own golf swing with the right side of guys. And I think, you know, Gary instills that in his golfers. He wants them to have their own identity, I think, and understand their identity quite a lot. And I remember watching Taylor once, and he comes down to the range. I'm giving some lessons, and he just gets a little small bucket out. He hasn't hit a golf ball for like 3-4 weeks. I said, "What are you up to, Coops?" And he goes, "Oh, I've got New South Wales Open pre-Q tomorrow." I was like, "Why are you going there, mate? I haven't seen you play golf for ages." He gets up there, just goes, stripes these 20 balls in a row. I think he might have hit the first 2 out of the heel, but the rest of the 18 were just like out of this world. And he just goes out there and just shot a cheeky little 8 under par. Hadn't played, hadn't seen a golf course, pre-chops for the New South Wales Open. Straight away, just knew his golf swing so well. I remember just watching it, just going, "Gosh, man, this guy's got it." You know, like, and he was so good and
Yeah,
just absolutely flushed
I
it.
agree with you. Yeah, he invited me and Theo Coronio, who's one of my students who played on the tour, out for a game at Manly.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, I'll come out and hit a few and play a few holes with you." And we both looked at each other and were like, "What is this guy doing working in a pro shop?
Yeah, he shouldn't be.
He
No.
should not. Taylor, if you're watching, you should not be working in a pro shop."
Mate, he was
I love
he
you,
was
mate. You should be out there on the tour. It's a crime.
he was so good. Well, I think he played in the Aussie PGA in the same one as Tiger Woods years ago at the age of like 17.
Yeah, he was a child prodigy in some areas, and yeah, my heart kind of breaks for those guys and for him in a way, you know, because he has what it takes, definitely to be out there.
It's interesting you say that though. Has what it takes. We understand being on tour is more than just hitting a golf ball.
Sure.
There's more to it, right? Anyway, so the right side of golf swing. So you got into that, and you just fell in love with it.
It's not that I fell in love with it. It's just that there was something that I was trying to fix. I had been trying to fix in my swing for a few years, and I'm a very hard worker. I would hit 400 balls a day.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get into the right position coming down. I was always, you know, stuck, which was the catch cry after Tiger. And no one could really get me to come down with my arms in the club in front of me. And I had no idea what I was doing, but a guy named Roy Vandersloot, the Lakes, was like, "Hey, look, if you come up and see Gary and he doesn't help you or fix your swing, I'll cover the travel costs." That's how confident he was. So I was like, well, I can't refuse that offer. He made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And then I went up there, and it was like awe-inspiring, because you had all these legends, like, to me anyway, sitting in and around where, you know, Gary's teaching hut or teaching area was. And I was just struck by all these guys who I'd looked up to, and I watched them hit, and they hit the ball differently. They didn't take divots, and they controlled their flight. And yeah, my first lesson was just like, "Okay, let's have a look at what you do." He's like, "Okay, the reason why you get stuck is because your setup's not right, and you're always trying to get back to your impact shape. Set up like this, just lift your arms up a little bit, and then just fold it up on the way through." It was kind of like that. It was that simple. And then they were all sitting there, right? Like, everyone was sitting there watching this lesson. And then all of a sudden the club just slopped down in front of me, and everyone was just like, "Guru does it again." It was kind of like this mystical experience.
All right. Well, tell me some principles. Yeah. Tell me, like, to educate the listeners and the viewers. Tell me some principles that we see in the right side of golf swing.
So essentially, what we want to try to do is set up with our body in the shape that it needs to be at impact. and have very good posture. A bent right arm at the start with a bit of this angle because we need this angle to hit. And then essentially if you turn and stay in the same shape and keep the club the same distance from the body, and that principle is radius, you keep that radius the same the whole way through, the club's going to stay square to your body and get rid of all the funky bits. And so essentially there's nothing in the way of the shaft when you get your backswing right. So you can swing the arms down as fast as you want once you've trained it, and there's nothing in the way.
Yes. So when we talk about impact shape, Nick, and one of the things I think if you're visually looking at a right-sided golfer, a person who practices the right-sided golf swing, I don't want to label them the right-sided golfer, but say someone who does the right-sided golf swing, you will see the left shoulder, the lead shoulder higher, right, than what we would see typically at a normal setup position. And as Nick mentioned, as a result, the trail arm would be more flexed because, that's the consequence of having the lead side higher, right? It's the only way you're going to keep that shape is the trail side's going to be lower and it's going to be more flexed. And you'll typically see the shoulders, we'll often see, in coaching, we use that 90-degree kind of tilt, that the shoulders moving in a certain manner. In the right-sided golf swing, we'll see that left shoulder just stay high. Is that what you'd say, Nick?
Yeah. So if I could stand up and demonstrate, I don't know if this is going to work. A little bit. So when you set up and that's the shape that I want to be in. You'll see this with Bryson a little bit, like with his start. He starts, another term for it is impact back. But if I start in this shape, when I swing my arms back, my shoulders naturally pull, and then the momentum of the club will pull me into a turn.
Yeah.
But if I drop my arms, that's how my shoulders will feel and look. Yeah. And the turn feels a lot smaller to people because the shape of the body and the spine means that the arms will pull the body around. Yeah. So that doesn't feel like a lot and it doesn't look like a lot. But if in other golf swings, if my spine's a little bit this way, in order to have anything, I've got to have a little bit more tilt.
Yeah, left side down.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what Nick's telling us there, right, is what you will see, if you're watching on YouTube, but what you'll see on the right-sided golfers is it won't look like they get a whole lot of chest turn. Looks that right arm, that trail arm, I should say, will be quite narrow. And that's a term I hear a lot of them talk about is the arms pull the body around. I think that's what I heard Baden say a few times as well in our podcast.
Yeah, and, if you're doing it correctly.
It's a very efficient looking type of neat and tidy is a good word of putting it, isn't it? But and it generates a lot of energy. I think it's a big misconception out there that you need a big body turn and to try and generate a lot of energy, and especially ground forces. Don't get me started on ground forces, but you don't need it, right? If you can keep your shape and you generate a lot of speed through your arms.
Yeah, and I think the other misconception as well is that we don't shift our weight. But actually, if you draw a line on the wall, which is the left side of the body, you'll see that all our players that do it right get through that line when they hit. So
yeah, they have to. They have to. It's a principle. You can't not You
can't not. You have to hit. Everyone has to get through that line to hit.
If you're hitting a good shot. Yeah. So what Nick's saying is people might say that there's not much lateral with them, but there has to be. And I'd be very interested enough to know that because I've been doing a lot of study with this new, I think it's German-based software called Motion to Coach. Part of the coaches on there who are studying this 3D stuff. And it's crazy. You get a 6-page document from each golf swing that gets made. It measures unbelievable amounts of data. And I'd be very interested to kind of see, you got to do it live. You can't just import stuff into it. So it'd be interesting to kind of see some of the right-sided stuff in that 3D format. Would be really cool.
You would have to get a player that's pretty good at it, and then a player that's actually swinging close to their model. Because a lot of players don't swing close to their model when they're out there.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Or get Taylor Cooper. Just get him in front.
Just get Taylor out. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, Taylor would be great for it. Actually.
Yes. Mate, he does. I don't care what he does. I'll just hit it I just love to hit it like him. I just love to hit a golf shot like him. Just love
he's pretty good.
All right. So let's get into some topic areas. So basically, people listening to this podcast is I like to ask the guest and talk about, 7 topic areas that, certain topic areas that they, feel I guess, the desire to talk about maybe, and something that they feel kind of comfortable in. And we're going to kind of go through some of those topic areas now. And one of the things I was very excited when I first read this one from you was you talking to me, and we had this massive conversation before we even went to air. We should have just recorded it, to be fair. But we're talking about the journey of improvement and how you particularly might see it differently from what the recreational golfer sees it or other coaches see it. What do you mean by that?
It's about, and I'll take you back to, you were talking about spending time with the Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
So the Buddhists would say, you have to have the correct view or right perception.
Yes.
And it's been my experience when people come up for a lesson, they have the wrong idea on how improving is done. It's something like, if I'll make an analogy here that I got off Glenn today, which is brilliant. They buy a really good guitar. They go and have one music lesson, and they're like, okay, cool, I'm ready to get on stage and just kill it. And
That's not bad. I like it.
I've bought these $7,000 clubs from Pureform, and you're the guru. You should be able to just give me that, magic fix like I saw on YouTube. The one swing, fix your slice. Yeah. Why isn't that happening? Type deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, I have to break through that conditioning or that program and explain to them that, improvement happens over a long period of time with a certain amount of lessons and a certain amount of work. And then you have to become effective at doing what we want you to do.
Yeah.
And that's a skill in of itself. So I often use Roger Federer as an example. I said, look, a principle of physical skill is how well you create an image in your brain of what I want you to do or what a teacher wants you to do, and then how skillful you are at recreating that. That's all. That's what the principle of physical skill is. So if I was to give Roger Federer a golf lesson, I said, Roger, this is how you set up, this is how the club goes, with his understanding, he would probably get a lot faster at golf than the average person. And he would understand from his tennis practice how much work goes into being great.
Yeah.
And so that's why I move people more towards packages now. And, I ask them, where would you like to be in 1 year? As opposed to, and then when it comes to improvement doesn't necessarily mean I get the great result now. You can improve, but not get the great result now. Like you can literally technically improve your posture, your swing, your radius, your shape, your club face, whatever. You can have a small incremental improvement. That doesn't mean you're going to go out on your Saturday comp or your monthly medal or whatever it is and shoot a better score.
Yes. And I think as well another point on that when people don't understand is the reason why I was talking to you before about how I have incorporated statistics a lot into my coaching was basically I found that through my studies that the recreational golfer, the way they viewed their golf and their certain weaknesses was not actually aligned with where they're supposed to be or where they thought they should be. So the fact of the matter is, like, people want to improve a certain aspect of their game when statistically that's actually a strength of theirs. And
100%. That's been my experience too. Like
yeah,
I'll get someone down and, if I had my preference with my teaching style, I'd probably teach short game first. But most people come and want to hit their driver better. And then if I were to take them to a bunker and go, hey, like hit this flop shot over this bunker, and they can't do it. So I like that idea because you can't argue with the statistics. I really like that you do that with your students because you can look at where they're actually losing the most shots and where we can get the most improvement, the fastest. And if you're smart and you're about that, then if you're a smart student, that's where you should want to work. Whatever the data says, you need to shut up in.
And I've got a data scientist coming on in a few weeks, but he I've spoken to him about a few things and he's just blown my mind. But it also helps, I've spoken about this on this as well. It helps identify, Nick's game versus Toby's game. Toby's game doesn't look like Nick's game. It's like, when does Nick play well? So when I get a good score from, a student, I say, great, you just shot 76, that's, what does 76 look like for you? So, all right, so we need to hit 12 greens. We need 50% up and down rate. We need to only lose one ball, 1 3-putt. What does it look like? And that can help identify your own golf game as well. But kind of a bit of a funny one to throw at you is that, through my studies around the data is the biggest club golfer's weakness to where it should be is 7 to 21 feet in putting is the biggest difference between them and elite. So like you'll find a lot of people can match it quite well in other areas, but that is generally the biggest gap that we see when people hop on collecting statistics that the weakness is. And it's like anything, right? You start hitting it good, you better get good at your lag putting, because you've got a couple of 30-footers in there.
Yeah.
All right. So, and then the journey of improvement. So how does this go when you tell people this philosophy or this understanding of how to get better? Do most people get on board?
That's a really good question. It depends on the open-mindedness of the student. And a lot of the men aren't going to be very happy with this, but I find women much easier to teach because they're a lot more open-minded and there seems to be a lot less ego-driven. But generally, I think that people that have struggled for a long time to improve, meaning they've been on the same handicap and these are the people that I tend to attract, they've been on the same handicap for, 5 years, 10 years, and they're just tearing their hair out because no matter what they do, they can't improve. They eventually accept it around, the second or third lesson mark after they've had some footage taken on what they do on the course and sent it to me. And they really grasp like how different they swing in the lesson versus what they do on the course and then what's required. And it's a slow journey for me to awaken them to that process generally. The term I like to use is golf IQ.
Love it.
So the average punter's golf IQ compared to someone who's a tour player, imagine a tour player is at 150 IQ, the average person, because they've been, back in the day it was Golf Digest, just reading articles, or they've just been on YouTube and hit with these, one fix wonders. And they have this idea that the golf industry sells them, that it's a quick fix and that obviously, gets more views and more likes, and that's what most people come when they've been searching for a long time with these ideas.
Yes. And on that, I think as well, and we're not disregarding the fact is that I truly believe that I can get someone hitting it better. I think everyone who comes to a lesson, Tish, is hitting it better by the end of it.
Yeah, I've seen your lessons. They're really, really, really good training.
No, but let's just say,
I literally follow your Instagram. I'm like, oh wow, he's fixed another guy. That's awesome.
I wish I could document it all. But anyways, let's just say, right, I believe most people leave the lesson to hitting it better. They should. If none of my students are, I mentioned on here the other day with Hugh Ma, I had to push everyone out 20 minutes because I had one guy who was struggling a little bit. And I'm not afraid to do that, right? So I wanted to make sure that everyone leaves with a very good understanding and hitting it better. But I also think, Nick, that there is, when you talk about the human conditioning and around what they're being sold as well, right, is that people don't practice the one thing enough. So they go, okay, great, got it, what's next? Where that to me is like, what's that old quote, I fear the man who practiced one kick 1,000 times and a man who's kicked 1,000 times. Whatever that is, right? That's Bruce Lee, whatever.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it is. But anyways, that type of situation where I think there's the industry is selling people fix this in one swing, right? I see that stuff, right? And I don't want to mention names because I actually have friends with a couple of guys who do that stuff on YouTube.
No names on this podcast.
One is potentially coming on. But if you get given the exercise, people listen to this, there is nothing wrong with doing something good. And what I say to my students, even one of my students the other day went to the camera and said, Is that it? If it is, just tell me to fucking do it better. Because that's what I tell them to do. I say, good, you did it. That's what you got to do. Just do it
Get
better.
better at that one thing. Yeah, just get better at that one thing.
There's nothing wrong with just owning that drill and doing it so good. And one of my other students the other day, Nick, reminded me that I told him this. He said, when I first started playing golf, Toby, you said to me that the good players train something till they can't do it wrong. So they can't do it wrong anymore. And the good golfers, the bad golfers train till they get it right, then they ask what's next.
That's brilliant.
The good golf. And I went, shit, I must have read something wise that day when I gave you a lesson, mate.
Yeah, that's been my experience too.
Yeah. Just get good, guys. Just if you've got this drill, just nail this drill and own it. And you can chip it around the golf course and break 80. Like, you don't need to.
Yeah. Well, 100%. And a good player that examples that is Tommy Fleetwood. There's some of his lessons are on YouTube, and they had this. They're like, why does your follow through look, like so short here, like this, And he was very candid, and he just said, well, look, I kind of like was hitting it really bad, and we just came up with this drill where I would just hit this knockdown shot, and then I flushed it when I did my drill. Like, it was just awesome. And then the light bulb went on, was like, why don't I play like this?
Yeah, I do.
And so his swing, essentially, when you watch it, looks like a drill. It's just like he gets up there and just like he drills it, finishes it, cuts it off here, grips down on it, keeps it small, and just, punts it down there. So yeah, he's someone who's probably does that drill, and if you watch his training videos, he just does that drill over and over and over and over again. And yeah, they're the people that do well. Is the people that own their drill, and then eventually the light bulb switches on where they're like, oh, that's really how I'm supposed to feel out there. But when I'm out there, I need to own it, but exaggerate it even more than what I do when I practice to look like that.
I love that. And I love the measuring it on the golf course too. Measuring on the golf course is a real testament to where you are, people listening to this. But also, one other thing is measuring your first ball of your next session is where you're at, not the last ball. So people film the last 5 balls and go, great, this is where I'm at. I'm like, no, you're not, brother. That's you after 4 hours of grinding, working on one thing.
What? That's so true. I remember playing when I was really struggling, right? And I spoke to Gaz, and he's like, yeah, well, Colsey just didn't hit anything above a 7-iron for like a year. And he just hit wedges, And I went, oh, well, fuck it. I'm not leaving St. Michael's driving range. For 3 months, I'm hitting wedges every day.
Yeah.
And I remember playing around with Kurt Stegbauer at the, and I'd always go back to my drill. And the first hole, I don't know if you've played at East Lakes, but it's like this short par 4. And
the dog leg left.
Yeah, I literally at that point in time was swinging my driver pretty close to like how I swung my wedges, and I could hit what we call a stunner shot or stop the follow through here, and I could do that off the deck with the driver.
Yeah.
And I no warm up, just lobbed up out of the car, pulled driver out, knocked it on the green, and Kurt was like, WTF, like, what was that? Like, but it rings true what you say to me now that I think about it, because if you own it, you can literally just step out of the car, put it on a tee and whack it off.
That's when you know you're in good shape, but it's definitely where you measure, like that's where you're at after you've warmed up. Obviously, like if you when I'm saying when you're judging it, you've just got out and just striped it. People listening to this, East Lake's first hole is so tight, and it's the most nerve-wracking tee shot in a professional tournament. It's like Nick's hit driver. It's not driver. It's 4-iron down the right side, and then a little sandy on. He's just hit a little pipe driver. Yeah. This thing's like 300, little dog leg left. This is like, I've got a better chance of hitting it out of my garage, then that's unbelievable. All right, so talk to me. So you got some friends, you've been around the guys on tour?
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to be around some really great minds and great players and spend time with them.
Who?
Well, James Nitties was one of my close friends in amateur golf. And we really vibed because we both have a Greek background, and we used to joke about being wogs in golf, which there were none.
Yes. That's true. That's so true. In Australia, obviously.
In Australia, at
Yeah.
least, you know.
That's so
And
funny.
so I really looked up to James. He was a much better player than me, and I really admired him. And
Mm.
I caddied for him in the New South Wales Amateur when I didn't qualify, and he did. He made it all the way to the final. And then not long after that, he had a lot of good results in professional events as an amateur, and he turned pro. And when he'd come to Sydney, I'd caddy for him in the events, and I learnt a lot from James. And
Yep.
yeah, so one of the
Sh- share with me. Share with me what have you learnt?
okay, so I think what I learned from James the most was like his ability to craft to turn 76 into 70. Like the
Yes.
pure grit and like not ever giving up and giving his best to every shot. And not entirely needing his best game, but he would just somehow craft it around, and he was very consistent. And in the first round of the Australian Open, he was paired with we were paired with Camilo Villegas and Andre Stotts,
Wow.
and yeah, there was no one watching. There weren't many. Well, there were people watching the first hole, but it was just like when we got out in the course, it was just kind of us. And James doubled the first. That in that Australian Open, the first was a par four, and he hit it through the fairway, and he was kind of stifled, and he made double, and he was 3 over early. And this was his first pro event, and it, and I'm like on the bag, trying to stay positive, trying to smile, trying to
So
keep,
nervous.
and he looked at me and he was like, "What are you smiling at? We've got a job to do, you know."
Oh,
And
that's
then
good.
the grit turned in, and that round for pretty much anyone else would have been 78, 79. And he grinded it out and he got it back to 1 or 2 over, and he wasn't hitting it great, but he went to the range and. He's like, "Oh, we'll go to the range." So I'm like, "Okay, this is going to be a big range session. We've got to get this back on track." And he just, rakes over 4 or 5 balls, hits 4 or 5, hits one great, and he goes, "Yeah, okay, cool. We've got this tomorrow." And I'm like,
No way.
"Dude, I think we should be hitting a few more of them." And then the next round he came out and he was like, he always liked to try to get money on with the other pros because it gave him more fire.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and then he had a great finish. I think he finished top 15 that week, and it was amazing to watch
Wow.
someone with that attitude. And yeah, I just have a lot of respect for him and how he's crafted a golf career and made it to the US Tour, and
Incredible.
yeah, just phenomenal to be around. His overall approach and his overall attitude was kind of like water off a duck's back,
Yeah.
and he was very good at letting stuff go and moving forward and very strategic.
Yes. I really, yeah, I love those types of golfers, right? Because I think a lot of us golf professionals or golf coaches as well, we have respect for those types of people who could really do that due to the nature of, it's the only way that we would have made it, is kind of grinding it out as well. So we see people doing that who just can just get the most out of their golf game. And I get really encouraged by that, and you really want to back them. You really want to be with them. So when you were saying there that, he turned a 78 into, he could turn a 78 into a par, whatever, cup 1 or 2 over, whatever. Tell me, what goes on? Do you think you put this down to his positive mindset or his short game? What goes into grinding out a good score?
That's a really, really good question. So he would know that he didn't quite have his best stuff, and he would we would sit there and pick the best shot for him in that moment on that time.
Okay.
So an example would be the 11th at the Lakes, which is a dog leg
Right. Yeah.
right par five.
John Daly's hole.
Yeah, John Daly dumped a few in the water there.
Walked off.
Yeah, lucky the club didn't end up in there with him. But no, yeah,
There you go.
and he would just strategize really well. Like if the wind was left to right, he'd really strategize the shot. Like sometimes he'd be within reaching reaching area of the green, but he'd just knock it into the right position, and then he'd play hard of the green. So when he didn't have his best stuff, he'd always be playing really smart golf shots. And I don't see that from my students. They're picking shots. I'm like, could you play this shot like 7 out of 10 times? Probably not. And they're still trying to like take it over this line or that line, and I'm like, that's not the play there. So the other thing he did really well is he played his shape almost perfectly.
Yeah. I love that. The first thing that came to my mind when you were talking about grinding it out was like you kind of pencil in a few par fives and you go, you know what, I can nudge it up there near the green somehow and get up and down, scrounge a couple of birdies out of these par fives and try and hold my round together. Like it's like, where are these par fives? Where can I get it? Where can I get, try and get a shot back on the field? But you made a good point there as well around the recreational golfer potentially choosing, a too risky a shot. And I tell you where this comes back to, but it's really good with statistics, Nick, is in my experience that when someone has their good round, they call it their career round, right? Say it's a 10 handicapper shoots 76. The first thing they'll tell you is it didn't feel that exciting. And what I mean by that is like they didn't make 10 birdies, they didn't hit at 350 off every tee. They just kind of hit 12 greens, maybe hit 10 greens or 9 greens, 10, whatever it takes, got up and down a couple of times, didn't lose a ball in the water, and just had a reasonable amount of putts. And I always look at it and go, that wasn't that as challenging as I thought. Well, take that mindset to when you play to stop trying to hit these shots you can't hit, because the double bogeys are coming from, a bit of poor execution, but a lot of the time, poor shot selection, right? So when Nitties is playing that round of golf at the Lakes, he's got double out of play, even though he knows he's scrounging it around and he's not having his best stuff. He's making sure he's not putting him in a place where he's going to make double, right?
Yeah, 100%. And they're very smart at that. I can give you another example on how this translates. I have another friend that I used to coach who played on the tour, and he's an amateur now. Mm-hmm. Alex, if you're watching, you're a legend. His name's Alex Catholos, and he recently played in the Foursomes Championship at the Lakes, and he just thought he'd have fun with his mate who's off 9. And Alex used to be a tour professional. He's very good at shot selection as well. And we were talking about it because they had like 72 the first round or 73 the first round, which a 9 marker. I was like, how did you do that? That's an absolute miracle.
Foursomes is hard.
Foursomes? He's like, I just realised like he's not picking the right shots. So I just talk him through and we pick the right shots. And they end up winning the club championship, the Foursomes championship.
No way.
And he said they won. And it was just, I was shocked because I know how hard Foursomes is.
So tough.
But he was like, you know what? We just went through a professional process, which was, okay, how far are we from the hole? Where do we want to leave each other here if we miss it? What's the percentage play? What shot can you hit here 7 out of 10 times? And they just kept going through a similar process like that. And that guy's shot selection was on every time because Alex was there to hold him to that. And this guy never played so good in his life. Yeah,
and he's also, Alex he knows this other guy's strengths probably better than he knows them too. And he's weak.
They do.
So he's like, I better not hit this one because he's not very good at this shot. I better put him over here. Because he's okay at this one. And that's really cool. I love that. I love that because like this takes it back to the journey of improvement, right? It's not just about, swing technique. There's a whole lot more to it. And this guy's played his best golf by just caddying. And I reckon I've always said that if I caddy for every single one of my golfers, they'd be 5 shots better.
You 100%. Yeah. And as we were talking before the show, I go out and watch my students play. And what I get from that is priceless because I see what shots they're naturally great at. I'm like, this person's really good at playing the draw in there. So that's the shape I'm going to work on them with. Or they're really good at playing, low punch shot, or like you can see their strengths and their weaknesses. So what they need to avoid out there, you can talk to them about that. But then you can also, and I know you've got the statistics, so that would probably help my coaching as well. But I can go, okay, I can see exactly where they're leaking shots. This person does not have a shot on the left to right wind on a hole that goes left to right. So I'm going to teach them to do that. And then next time we're in a lesson, I'll set them up on the right-hand side of the range. And I'll be all right, cool. Let's aim a few over the fence, or if the wind's off the left, so that it's going to push the ball out of play. I'm like, okay, your job is to hold your shape and give it a bit more of this one, and we're going to work on this shot shape. So I'll show them how to do it, but then I'll test them in the lesson and go, okay, this is the course. And then we set up their practice drills to what's going to get them to play great, to work on the right shot shapes and the right shots.
Love that. Yeah, so what people listening, Nick and I were talking before the show, is that he likes to see his players a lot on the course. And that's where you tend to get out there and watch them and make judgment on them, because I think as well is they're getting professional feedback and feedback probably without the emotion attached to it as well. Would you agree, Nick? Like, it's just them, you're just stating the facts of what you see, and you're not emotionally holding that scorecard like they are, and all that scar tissue of that left to right breeze I haven't been able to handle my whole life. All right, so let's keep talking about tour players. You're mates with Stoltzy and Andre Stoltz. I'm saying Stoltzy like I know him. I don't know him at all, but Andre Stoltz.
Yeah, he's a legend. But it's actually a really funny story. So I've been training. I call him my trainee, but I've been training Theo, who was one of my students, to teach. Yeah. And he's just finished his playing career and was talented, and he's working in a shop in drum and golf now, and he's just teaching out of there. He's just getting kick-started. He's doing great. And back in the day when Theo was young, he was quite the talent, and he was paired with Stoltzy in the final round of the Papua New Guinea Open, and I think Theo opened with 63. He was 19 or 20, 63, wow. 60-something, paired with Stoltzy, leading by 2. And he played with Stoltzy in this event, and I think Stoltzy outfoxed him a little bit. He didn't quite have the experience and might have played a little bit of gamesmanship on him. And Stoltzy won that event. Anyway, fast track, years later, we're talking 10 years later, Stoltzy rocks into Drummond Golf looking for a putter. And he looks at Theo and he goes, oh, don't I know you from somewhere? And he's like, yeah, we played together, remember, in this tournament. And Stoltzy's like, what the F are you doing working in a pro shop and working in Drummond? And they started talking, and Stoltzy's like, I'm struggling with my putting. It's no good. And Theo was like, I'll fix your putting. And so they fitted him with a putter, and he gave him a putting lesson, right? Next week, Stoltzy won.
No way.
He won, right? And then he put it on his socials and everything, and Theo showed me that. I was like, fuck, Theo, you did really well with him, mate. And then a few months later, he comes down to Barton Park, for a check-in before he's going to go away. And what I learned from him was what his skill was. He had the lesson, and then he straight away incorporated that into his pre-shot routine, into his process, and he thought about how he was going to compete with that.
Love that.
And that's his skill. And then I contemplated it. I'm like, oh, what? Wow, normal people don't do that. It takes them months to incorporate it, but he's a genius at that, because he will literally change his posture, his setup. And sometimes when you make those changes with good players, it works immediately. But just listening to him talk through his process, he was like, okay, so what I did was, and he talked through how he developed a pre-shot routine and how he felt he was going to play with that and how it gave him confidence. And it was just remarkable. And then a light bulb went on to me. I'm like, oh, I have to help people develop this skill of how they're going to incorporate this to go and play well and find their own way to do that. And he found his own way to do it. And I was shocked at his skill. I was shocked. I was just like, wow. And I was very proud of Theo, of course. And that's
incredible. Can you tell me how we can do this? How can the recreational golfer do this?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think the thing is to imagine and practice in your mind how you're going to take this out there, and own it. Do the drills such that you own it and it feels comfortable to you, and you're confident you can repeat it. That's a really good question.
That's okay. Do you think as well that it comes from he's obviously incredibly highly skilled, right? But he's clearly got some really good trust in the advice that he's getting, and he's got some really strong belief systems as well to be able to do that. You know, like to just go, boom, I'm committed, I'm in. Let's do this, you know, and let's give this a roll. And he's been playing tour golf
Well,
for a
maybe
long
you just
time.
touched on it there. Maybe you're right. Like he saw improvement. Like he was like, okay, my stroke looks so much better now. My posture looks so much better. That's all I need. I'm going to go out there and own that. And that spark is all I need. Whereas the average golfer will come in, have a lesson, they look better, but it's just like they're not going through that process and they don't have that energy around it, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I actually saw Andre Styles. He won the Legends Player of the Year on the senior circuit last year.
Yeah, he's impressive.
Yeah, I was at the Greg Norman Medal, and he was there. That's where he picked it up and won it. Oh, he's impressive. And he only got back to golf. It was a funny story. Like he wasn't going to play tournament golf again, but I think it was something to do with his wife. Pushed him into it, I think, or something like that. It was something trivial in regards to that. That was one of the best nights of my life, I reckon, Nick. Like going to the Greg Norman Medal, I was lucky enough to be nominated because I won the New South Wales Award thing. But getting up there, right, and listening to Cam Smith, Adam Scott, Cameron Davis, Lucas Herbert, Ian Baker Finch, Greg Norman, he zoomed in on the call. Like these guys just talk golf. It was
Wow.
just awesome.
Yeah.
And there was like a sit down thing on stage, and it was just really cool. And a story I've shared, Nick, and I'll share it with you. I've shared it on this podcast before. Was Cameron Smith, right? And I think they were replaying it a fair bit for the Open that we just had from last year when he played. And I think it was the 71st hole where he had that 2-putt around the bunker.
Yeah, that was unbelievable.
And I think it was that, or it was a chip shot on 16 or something like that, right? It was one of those two scenarios. And they asked Cam, like, what was that like? Because he won Golfer of the Year, being the Open champion. And he was probably a shoo-in for it, to be fair. But he won it. And they said, what was that situation like, Cam? And he goes, I love it. And they said, what do you mean? He goes, I love it when I can't feel my hands when I'm that nervous. And I just remember hearing it going, you're a freak. Because I see my best mate teeing off, you know, caddying from the Australian PGA, and I'm too nervous, you know, or I see my players over a 3-foot putt to make the cut on the LAT Access Tour, and I'm nervous, and he's just sitting there I love it when I can't feel my hands. That's when I'm going to play my best golf. And there's not many people in the world, Nick, who could say that.
That's very true. I've actually, it's interesting you say that. I think that the great players love the occasion and love being under the pressure, and that's what they live for. It's kind of like a thrill for them. It's like that moment, and that's what they live for.
And it's so... People will tell you, Nick, that they will live for it, but it's when you heard Cam say it as well,
It was
he
genuine.
proved it.
Yeah.
He proved it, and you could hear it, and it was
100%.
It was goosebump stuff, and I literally thought in my life, like, I thought of all the golfers who I watch on TV, and, you know, I've spoken to Grant about this as well on the podcast, his coach, and about Cam's career when every level he got presented at, he just, no worries, I got this. You know, his first ever US Open was at Chambers Bay, and he was like a kid, and he finished tied third or tied second. Like, he's a freak. You know what I mean? Like, first major. That's not supposed to happen, you know, and everything he did, it was just unbelievable. These tour guys, you know, we see how good they are ball striking wise. You know, we see what all the skills they got on the range, but the brass balls these guys have got to play golf at this level with this much on the line, I couldn't do it.
Yeah, it's the principle that I would call it is to change your relationship to your nerves. So if you have the association that nerves are a good thing and they're going to make me perform better, and that's been your association, and then on top of that you have the results to back that up, that when you do get nervous, you go to another level, and we see that with all the great players. and they somehow intuitively know that. We see that down the line, a lot of these guys play unbelievable shots. Like anyone else at Sawgrass, when he missed the fairway right in the pine straw, chipped it into the piss, and then
Yes.
he dropped it and just hit this unbelievable and I'm sitting back watching that going,
Yeah.
that shot is just, that up and down is just unbelievable. Like
Yeah. And the
after,
shot he 17. And the
yeah,
shot he hit
just
on
walked
17.
up. Oh, sorry.
And the shot he hit on 17 too.
Yeah. Yeah, it was incredible. But it's almost what I love about Cam Smith. He's actually got that old school Aussie swag. Like, where he pardon my French, he just does not give a fuck. You know,
Yeah.
he really embodies that subtle art. If you've read the book Subtle Art of Not,
Yes.
it's a great
Good
book.
swag.
But
It is.
he's the embodiment of that on the golf course. It's kind of like
Yes.
this Zen cool as well.
And I tell you what, people listening to this, right? If you're in a situation as well where you're in a match play format, right, when you're up against someone, something I heard once in rugby league, which I follow closely here, NRL in Australia, was a coach said to a player who was a fullback a fullback, and so they're generally one of the most fittest players in the field, and said, if you're feeling fucking tired, just remember everyone else is more tired than you. So you step up a gear. And that was kind of a big kick in the, and I started thinking about golf straight away, was like, if you're nervous in a situation, your playing partners are nervous too. You know what I mean? If you can get through this nerves and, somehow work through it, like you said, the way you can view your nerves and kind of look at it from a outside looking in, then you've got an opportunity to pounce on it, right?
Yeah, and there's a way to practice it as well. I often get my students to play for something in putting comps and chipping comps, and especially the ones that want to go big time. I'm like, okay, guys, we're going to tear each other's throats out today. We're really going to go after each other. I mean, sledging, all that stuff,
Yeah.
which it gets fun actually. But what I want you to do is not be at the effect of the external circumstances, but enjoy the pressure. Learn to love it. And that's something that Nitty's had to do. It was funny. He'd be playing a practice round. He need to get something on the game because he needs some heat to be at his best.
Yeah.
Like he'd play a practice round with nothing there. It'd be just, and then all of a sudden money would go on, and it'd just be like the fox hunting.
Yeah. I love that. And Zane Scotland, a friend of mine who's a golf pro over in the UK, and he talks about this a lot. He talks about how when you're a recreational golfer, an amateur golfer as a kid, lots of coaches listen to this, right? You're a kid and you just do chipping competitions all day long. And as soon as you turn pro, you think you're too fucking good to do chipping comps and you just go do block practice. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have chipping comps as a pro. All of a sudden you don't do it. And, that's where we learn our craft and our skills, is around the greens doing this stuff. And we need to kind of look at that progress. And the first thing, whenever I have kids who might come to me for short game work, I go, you've had, when I was a kid, I got a pretty classy short game, I'd admit. Like, it's one of my strengths. And my first six students were tour professionals, went on the Australian Pro-Am circuit, because I taught them short game, some of the skills that I learnt. I never had a fucking short game lesson in my life. I just learnt these skills, from just spending hours and hours around a green, where I give lessons to some kids now and I'm like, great, okay, I've given you some fundamentals here for some technical block practice. Go do 20 hours this week at the chipping green. Just go play, go chip. And that's where you'll learn the art, right? And that's where sometimes we lose a little bit when we turn pro, I think, as well. And like you've incorporating that into your training with the squad guys, right?
Yeah, and something to incorporate is the reason why I believe you get good when you're a kid is because you're a child at play.
Yes.
And when you're a child at play, your energy's so light, you're just doing the thing for the love of the game. You just can't get enough of like going out there and chipping. And so if you have the mind of a child at play when you're practicing, you will learn a lot faster and you will love the practice. So it's also, I've been around many great coaches, and kind of like these guys that have got this horse whisperer type approach where they whisper something in the player's ear, but what essentially they're doing is they're bringing that little child out that loves to play and empowering that child and activating that creative, playfulness inside. And then what happens to tour players when they start playing for the money? Now they're playing for survival. They're not playing for the play. They're not playing for the love. They're not playing for the fun. But the great players like Mickelson's one, who's kept that child at play. He's very, child at play with everything that he does. From what I can see around the greens and all that stuff, and he loves it.
Yeah, it's also a good learning environment too, right? Because when you're at play, you're also extremely comfortable. Like you're comfortable at that same time. So not only can you optimize your performance, but when we're comfortable, but in a learning state, you can take more on. When you're in a fearful state and you're uptight and you're not comfortable, you can't learn. You can't listen. You know what I mean? There's no one. You can't hear anything. You can't hear anything, let alone learn anything. So yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it. Tell me about. You're much of a Tiger Woods fan?
Huge. When I was young, I loved him. I was there I jigged school to go to the 1996 Australian Open.
No way.
Yeah, I jigged school to go there at the Aussie.
Did he? Was he an amateur that year? Sorry, Nick. So 1996. Was he an amateur? Was that when he won the Masters?
He just turned pro. I'm not 100% sure. I think he just turned pro. I think Butch Harmon was there as well. But I sat by the first hole, watched everyone tee off before, and that time the Australian Open was set up like brutal. Like I mean, the rough was this thick.
Where are we?
At the Aussie, sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
And I watched like 14 pros hit off the first, and then Tiger got up. There was like a huge kerfuffle there, and he had this small. It was a 3-wood, and I was like, "Why is he hitting 3-wood here? Like it's a par 5." And there were bunkers on the right, and the 14 guys that went before him literally just hit it, pin high to the traps, and Tiger took 3-wood over the bunkers and hit 6-iron in, and I have never seen power like that. I had never seen power like that. I was like literally dropped. Like how the fuck did this guy just hit that? Like with a 3-wood. It was insane. I'd never seen anything like that. But funny story, he actually had 80 that first round. That's how hard the course was.
Whoa. I tell you, when you talk about Tiger's power there as well, it's a shame there wasn't a whole lot of... there was no ball and club tracking like Doppel Raiders back then. So no one actually really knows how fast he was actually going. But with some of those, that steel shaft that he had...
Yeah, the steel shaft with the Cobra driver. X100.
I've got some old school footage, and it's like on a VHS tape. My friends give me a hard time when I pull it out. Like, it's terrible. But you can just hear it and see it, and it's just... I think it's compared to what was going on then, it's more powerful than what we see now. Like, I really do. Do you agree?
I would agree. Like, Rory's pretty close. Like, I've seen Rory up close, but I have not seen anything like that. Like a disparity between, like, there was a clear difference. Like, such a big difference. Like, it was like the difference between watching Tyson fight and watching, Monday.
NRL boxer.
Yeah, like literally. But it was like, this isn't a fair fight. Like this is not this guy is a monster. Like, what is this?
But when you say like Rory, right? I think Rory's golf swing, is incredibly optimized to hitting the driver really far. Like he's like 6 to the right and like 6 up or something, right? Like it's some really crazy numbers. But Tiger was hitting it Tiger's club head speed was really fast, but he was like down on it too. So he was hitting it a long way, and I don't think he was hitting it. I don't know what his TrackMan numbers were early on.
And he used the Galata. It was a Tour Professional 90.
Yeah, and he was hitting...
I don't know if you remember those. But...
Yeah, the Tour Professional, those things don't stay round. He was hitting an angle of attack down on the ball. So people listening to this, like Tiger, we hear, people, we hear the whole story, but hit up on the ball, and, people who optimized like on the tour, right? Let's put it this way: is that it's not so much the fastest club head speed hits at the furthest, right? Because you got to optimize the performance of your driver in regards to how you're hitting it, right? Where Tiger was like 2 down, I think, at one point, and he was like hitting it miles past everyone.
Yeah,
And
it
it
was.
was crazy, crazy
Yeah.
stuff. So tell me about some of his. Have you incorporated any of his drills into your training at
Oh,
all?
yeah. So I think the only bit of YouTube content that I allow my students to watch is there's a great one with him with Butch Harmon on the Golf Channel.
Yes.
And so after he won the Masters in '97, he won by a gazillion, but the course was wide open, and he could just bomb it over all the trouble. And he hated when he rewatched the footage. He didn't like what he saw. So, and he knew that if he continued down that path, he wouldn't be able to win a British or he wouldn't be able to control it around the US Open. So they started work on his swing.
Yeah.
And they started this drill where he'd set the club early and go to the top and stop and bring the club back in. And then you had this really beautiful segment where Butch is just like, I thought Greg Norman was the hardest worker I'd ever seen until this guy came along. And he outworks Greg like you wouldn't imagine.
Yeah.
And then he said something really funny. It was like, I have these average punters come to me for one lesson and they think they've got it. This guy is the most talented guy in the world to ever, one off at that time. He wasn't like the GOAT then, that there was a possibility. But like this guy's the best player in the world, and he spends more time on his drills than anyone I've ever seen. And the average punter just has one lesson and think they've got it. And this guy's got more talent, more ability, more time, and he works harder. And so he practiced for 2 or 3 years straight till he owned that drill. I think Tiger in that YouTube video says, I had to keep working on it to put it in the spot that he wanted me to. And then, at the back end of 99, it all clicked and he went on the biggest tear that anyone's ever seen.
It was insane. And, when Nick talks to their guys about, recreational golfer, thinks that they've got after one session as well. And when Tiger had that one drill that he was working on with Butch in regards to setting that club, how Nick was explaining there, it's not like he didn't have to talk to Butch for the whole year. He still was seeing Butch Harmon regularly, but we make
100%.
necessary tweaks to the exercise. So when we work with golfers, we will educate the golfer on how we want impact to look and how we want certain things to look like. And then we'll work with that golfer within a controlled environment of a drill or an exercise or a half swing, a three-quarter swing, a right foot back, whatever it might look like to incorporate that. But we'll make little tweaks along the way, but with that goal of hitting where we want to be. So, with my students who are listening to this right now, you're not just having that one drill and going away. We're always working on that exercise there to try and improve it, because sometimes, we don't get it right exactly the first time and we have to make little flow-on effect things that happen. Would you agree with that, Nick?
I would agree. He was seeing Butch all the time. Sorry, and I should have added that in, but he was at the Butch Harmon schools all the time, and that's something that I realized. I was like, wait, these guys are more talented, practice more, and they just come once every so often and only get like one lesson every month or something and think they're going to get better. That's actually, in my experience, not how any improvement's done, and that's not how any of the tour players do it. The tour players have a regular lesson at a specific date, and they have check-in times. They check in their drills, they check in their on-course swings, they check in the shots that they're trying to play, also obviously their statistics, and it's a relationship where both parties mutually flourish through the engagement.
Yeah, I would agree. And there's strategies around this for people listening and coaches listening as well. There's strategies you can do this that are still cost effective at the same time, isn't there, Nick?
Now with Skillus is unbelievable time to be working on your golf. Because at any time, like if you have a subscription with a pro and you can send your stuff through and have them look at it within a day, and sometimes on the day, and you're getting constant feedback. Like it needs a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that. Keep doing, this drill, that drill. Okay, because in a coach's, in my mind anyway, I have a vision of what I I want to see down the road or at the end of it. And there are stages, you know.
Yeah.
I'm getting someone to shut the club on the way back so they don't flip it on the way through, you know, because they're too open or some such thing. So stage one might be to like learn to feel the club more shut going back. But then there's stage two where, okay, now I'm going to give you a punch drill after you've owned the backswing to match it up and hit the ball great.
Yeah.
And something funny really happens a lot where I've been putting in fundamentals like posture and shape and radius and club face, doing all this hard work, you know, and they're not getting very far. And then we have this lesson where I come in and go, okay, now just do a little bit more of this on the through, you know, and then they just start flushing it. And they kind of look at me like, why didn't you give me that lesson from the first time? And it's like, you're like, dude, we've worked our asses off to be able to get you to do that. And that's the pathway that we had in mind, or I had in mind. So now with Skillist and, you know, you can be in constant contact and feedback and very cost effective.
Yeah, it's great. So Skillist being, you know, this major sponsor of this podcast, but you've also got the access there because you've laid down that platform and how you want something to look like, and then you can stay in constant contact with that golf coach, you know. So as long as you're a good communicator, God, it's amazing what you can achieve through it.
Yeah,
it's
and
incredible.
you have access to great coaches, you know, that you wouldn't normally have access to.
Yeah.
But one of the kids that I coach is off to college in America, but we've set up a whole process of each week we're gonna look at your drills. We're gonna look at this shot that we're working on, which is little cut shot like John Rahm plays, and we're gonna look at whether you know how much you own those shots and your putting stroke from the back. So every week I get probably 10 swings to look at a specific date. We look at those swings. And we also look at the core swing to see how close it is to, you know, the practice and where it's off. And sometimes, you know, because he used to hook it, and he gets out and goes into old patterns and he just looks at a certain hole and sets it up too far right, trying to play a cut shot. And it's just something simple like drawing alignment lines down his feet and going, dude, what shot are you trying to play here, man? Like, and he's like, oh, I was trying to cut that one in there, coach. I was like, doesn't look like it's going to cut with that start, mate. So... and that's that constant feedback that you're talking about, that as a teaching pro you're making small adjustments, and that's what all the tour pros have.
Yes, exactly right. It's like I will explain to people that it feels like I'm a tour coach at times, you know, getting to ride the waves. And, you know, I had 2 PBs today when I opened up the laptop, which was fun.
Awesome.
You know, one guy today shot par. I saw it on Instagram first, actually. He posted on Instagram. And what was the other one? That's right. Joey shot his career low of 82, which was exciting, right? So this guy, we'll put this into consideration, Nick, right? I forced this guy to do statistics, and after he shot...
You forced him how?
I forced him. I put him in a lock hold. He lives in America somehow, but I just did a virtual physical headlock. And anyways, we identified a few problem areas. I made him get up before work twice a week to go to the practice chipping green because he has an indoor studio at his home. And all of a sudden, we revolutionized his whole scoring. It was in the 90s, and we went straight bang into 82. After 3 weeks of just focusing on statistics, and he kept saying to me, like he'd send me a driver lesson, and I go, your driver statistics are X. Put it away. I don't care. You know what I mean? We can't make that driver any better. If it's any better, you know, you're out there playing with Stoltzy off the first tee, you know, like it's nice.
I have
like,
a question for you. How did that make you feel to get someone from the 90s to the low to mid 80s?
It's good. It's just as good as winning. You know, when someone can put up a score that's quite proud, you know, they're proud that they can put their identity to, because these guys are really keen to get good at golf. Like they love golf. They want to get better.
Yeah, I would agree. For me personally, it's something that's come up before in the past, is some people go, oh, well, I'm just a 27 marker. You don't want to work with me. But I find that I get just as much joy from getting that 27 marker down to 20 as what I would getting a play from 5 to scratch.
Oh, 100%. And I'll always say it to the person as I say, thank you for trusting me. That's what I always will say at the end of each message. You know, we get one probably a week, someone shoots their best score, right? And I'll always just say, thank you for trusting me, because people have got to trust the process to getting better. And it involves a whole change of your mindset in regards to how you're looking at this complex sport called golf. And it involves, like, you know, the way we learn, the way statistics, how we approach the course. You know, I have my golf physio who I use online, like lots of stuff. And as soon as you can, I get a 27 guy and I go, mate, no one on the, I should say this politely, anyone who's serious about being better at golf, you can't, you know, be over an 18 handicap. When I mean that, like, if you love golf and you're over 18, something's not right? If you want to get better.
Yeah, if you have the intention and the passion to get better, I would agree. I actually really believe that with correct work, correct practice and commitment, and a good practice schedule. And if you're effective at doing what your coach wants you to do, and is a good coach, yeah, you should be off better than 18.
Yeah. Anyways, that's enough about me just talking about it.
I have a question for you though. Like, how do you get people to see the improvement process and get them to update their golf IQ on that?
How do I get them? In what way? How do I do it?
So if someone comes to you and they've had the, you know, I watched this Hank Haney. Oh, sorry, no names.
That's okay. Hank's okay. You can say Hank.
One swing fix, and now they're hitting driver draws that look like they go 300 on the advert.
I have an easy one.
Yeah,
I say, if you went for one run around the block, you'd still have a fat gut. And they always say, I bought this new.
That's great.
And I say, I bought this new driver, and I go, well, if I went and bought a brand new pair of shoes, I'd still be a fucking slow runner.
This is true.
And if a shit driver goes and buys a brand new car, they're still shit at driving cars.
Still shit at driving, yeah.
Yeah. So like, I basically educate them on. I tell you, I have some very, very simple strategies, and one is I'll ask statistics straight up if someone keeps statistics, right? And I liken it very much to, do you own a business? Yes. Do you do bookwork? Yes. Imagine if you went to your accountant and the accountant said, how was your year? Yeah, it was all right. How do you know? It just felt all right. Did you count the numbers? No. So it just felt all right. Oh, that's good. Let's just tell the government that it felt all right. We don't have to pay any taxes. You know? So I'm like, if I owned a golf shop, someone come in and I'd say, how was the day? The boss come in. I go, oh, yeah, it felt pretty good. Well, can you print off the stock report? No, not allowed to look at it. Not allowed to. Why not? Because you're not allowed to. It's like, well, fuck. So anyways, so I do that first is make people identify their golf game and where the strengths and weaknesses are. It's the first thing I have to try and do.
Yeah, I love that approach.
Strengths and weaknesses. I'll always pick out the strengths. Always pick out what everyone does really, really well and just what problem areas they need to work on. So, yeah, it just goes score, statistics, ball flight, and strike. That's how I work. And then from there, I just have to educate people what it's like to get there, and it just takes a lot of copy and pasting the same message. But I have a pretty good blueprint in place, Nick, that I get people to try and, you know, follow and learn. I think most people get on board pretty quickly. But yeah, I have a lot of fun with it. But also too, Nick, I probably care too much. In my experience, I care too much, you know, and I want people to get it, but I'll always make sure that we suit.
By care too much, do you mean you suffer a little bit when you see them not doing so well?
I suffer when they don't follow the process.
Me too.
So I'm like, oh, this is happening. Well, why are you doing that? We never once spoke about that.
Yeah. We call those people the searchers.
Yeah.
They're hard to deal with. Yeah. And it resonates with me because I often feel like that too. You're like, dude, I just spent like all this time and energy thinking and contemplating how to get you better and designed a specific drill that was just for you. And then next week you're changing your grip, which we never talked about.
I changed on the driver because I was losing it too much. But I tell you one thing.
It hurts. Students, it hurts.
yes, as
Hurt
we're
us.
kind of,
Don't
you
hurt
know,
the good coaches. We're on your team.
I think one strategy right before we move on from that subject area is I actually like the using case studies a lot, Nick. So if someone is, I have case studies kind of saved, like certain swing types, and I really believe that there is, there's a lot of patterns out there that we see, but we see a lot of the similar types of patterns, right?
Yeah, I would agree.
When X does X, they do Y, then they do Z, right? And we see that flow on effect. I will show people a case study and say, hey, Nick, I've seen this before. This is what it looked like. This is how we got him out of it. This is what you got to do. And that's what I'll generally like to do a lot of the time is case study. But one thing I'll often say is sometimes I just kind of smile and the student will say something to me like, what are you smiling at? And I just go, it's so unique that every single person who jumps on the lesson tee or jumps in the iPad for an online lesson, how everyone's mind computed to move this mass of a club around their body, everyone decided to do it differently. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I find that so unique and interesting that, Nick's on my tee, he moves the club this way, the next guy moves the club this way, the next guy moves the club this way. And I was going, how did that happen? You know what I mean? Like, I just find that really unique and interesting, and I really enjoy trying to work that out. So if it's from an environmental factor from something prior, like, did they play soccer and they decided to move that way? Did they play tennis? Did they, what's their type of work? Why did they move this way? I really enjoy working at that because I think a lot of the time we'll find out that their environmental factors or their day-to-day life is causing them to move a certain way. I think that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. So in some sense, you're kind of like a very good psychologist there.
Well,
You're doing psychological profiling in some way. Like you're finding out their history and why they formed the swing that they did and maybe the beliefs around golf they did and where that comes from. And you know how to change a specific pattern based on your previous experience of that pattern as well, which is really powerful.
But what you got interesting there as well, right, is that I gave a lesson the other day to like first one, it was a lady baseballer. She played baseball for Australia, right? And she is a batter. So you guys can imagine how someone is holding a bat, right? And how they got it behind them. Their trail shoulder is completely internally rotated and their trail elbow is looking up to the sky, right? It's like, it's up there, right? It's right up there really high. And that's not conducive to good ball striking in my instruction for coaching, right?
Unless you're Arnold Palmer.
Yes. There's a few, maybe Matthew Wolf, a few of these types of swings.
Yeah.
But I had to work out quite quickly, Nick, this lady, she's a newbie golfer or whatever. She hit the ball quite well when she got it. But there's no fucking way in the world she's going to change, like, without being disrespectful. Like, she's going to, it's not so much the backswing set, it's the downswing reaction. That's the difficult thing to change. So we're changing backswings to suit how people react, right? So if someone likes to shallow the club a little bit, you'll see the butt of the club shallow a little bit more. Might pitch their lead arm up a little bit higher on the way back. If someone likes to budge it out a little bit more, might pitch it a little lower. There's no way in the world I wasn't going to get this lady to react. Like she's swung a baseball. I don't know how many times she swung at a baseball. So I had to kind of think on the spot, how am I going to get this to work? That was tough. That
is tough. It is tough. But it's fun when you solve it.
It took some time. She's just looking at me like,
yeah.
I don't open my mouth until I'm ready. She's like, are you right? I'm like, yeah, I'm coming. Just hit some more balls. Please, I'm just trying to work this out. But it's interesting. It's very interesting. Hey, tell me, one of my, I guess, sponsors, one of my minor sponsors that I have in day-to-day life is Back to Basics putting mirrors. Link is below. Fantastic putting mirror used by Cam Smith, designed by Richard Woodhouse and Grant Field. I use a Pro Path mirror every golf lesson I've got. Have you got any putting stories for me or any putting drills, Nick, that you can share with us in the Back to Basics putting segment?
Yeah, I find when people have a stroke that's kind of, a cut stroke, let's say, or their path isn't great, they've it's obviously setup factors, but once you get them decent, they actually are still used to seeing the greens a certain way or reading the greens a certain way, but their stroke has changed. And so they still look at putts the same way when they're out there. So one thing I noticed, I would fix people's stroke in in a session and get them looking a lot better. And we'd go out in the course and I'd be like, Jesus, this person's aiming like 2 feet right of the hole.
Yeah.
So one drill that's really powerful when you've actually fixed your stroke that I found is setting up 2 spots either side of the hole, one left to right putt, one right to left putt, but having your putting mirror set up to an intermediate target on both sides of the hole and putting to that point. Because what I noticed was most people, when they look at putts, they look at the hole and they're like, okay, it's 3 cups right. And they're not actually picking a spot that's like their intermediate target. So I hope that makes sense.
So do you like someone to pick up a smaller target? Would you say, is that what you're saying? Like something more specific
get them
than
to
3
putt to
cups?
an intermediate target rather than looking at the hole. And then just doing drill after drill where they hit 5 putts from on the right to left putt. Okay, now we're going to go back and hit the left to right putt and just get the feel for where that's setting up. And the putting mirror is obviously a really powerful tool because it makes sure that you're lining up where you want to go. But if you've got the putting mirror there and you just train without actually looking at a spot, you'll miss, and you don't train your brain to read putts that way, you're going to read putts differently when you're out there.
Yeah, I love that. And Cameron Smith practices alignment just as much as anyone. I've heard that he just spends a lot of time in alignment. There's no point having the world's best putting stroke if you can't fire it in the right way, right?
Yeah.
And you've seen those statistics around the putting, right, Nick? Like when you're 2 degrees off from 6 feet, you miss the hole. Like it's I don't know the specific numbers, but it's pretty gnarly, right? So do you use a putting mirror each time you give lessons?
I don't use a putting mirror per se. I do use a piece of paper sometimes. I gave my putting mirror away. I usually have one, but I use a piece of paper and I just put it on the ground, on the carpet or wherever we are. And the piece of paper acts as like, that's where your face wants to be square. And this is for people that don't have one. And then the line's there. So I get the putter lined up square to the paper and then I get them working on the stroke. But also with the right-sided stuff, we try to get everyone to set up very similar through the bag. Yeah. So if I fix someone's shape, so if someone's inverted kind of this way, and all of a sudden I get them to do that opens the face, and now they all aim right. So once I fix the body, then I do path work and mirror work and get them to do that. So
yeah. So what Nick's saying there, people listening in, is he talks about when he sets a putting stroke up with the right-sided method is they carry the very similar shoulder alignment to what he does with the normal ball striking. So left shoulder, lead shoulder's quite
and
high.
shape of the body. So the more that you can make things alike. So if the putting setup is similar to the iron setup and you're doing something similar through the bag, it's a lot easier to repeat. But if I have an idea of how I set up with my irons, with my woods, whatever, and then I grab the putter and I'm doing something completely different, it's difficult to repeat and improve in my experience.
I love that. And if people, we're talking about putting mirrors there, right? The back to basics putting mirror, one I've used for a very, very, very long time, when the founder first brought it out. It's got a great stroke on it, so you can actually see where they recommend the stroke to go and the club face orientation throughout the putting stroke at the same time. It's everyone that you see Cam Smith use. It's fantastic.
Yeah,
Links
it's
below
also
anyway.
awesome for getting into the same spot every time and your eye line.
Yeah.
So
I love it.
A lot of great putters like Cam Smith are just like, okay, I know if my eyes are in the right spot and my alignment's right, I'm good to go. So they know once they get those general alignments. But the putting mirror, for me, my understanding, is about being able to repeat and get in and set it up the same every time as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've mentioned this many times on here. Lucas Herbert, he's coach Dom, a friend of mine, and Lucas uses the word recalibration. Just gets on there, calibrates himself and goes, yeah, I'm good. Like he just alignment's good. This is good. This is good. Everything's square. And, I think we're fortunate enough. Like, if you look at statistics wise, two of the world's best putters are Australian, Lucas Herbert and Cameron Smith. It's crazy. All right, that's back to basics putting segment. Talk to me about one topic before I ask you some kind of trivial questions to finish off with. You mentioned here, and I'm interested about this one, right? How to resurrect the Aussie Tour. What do you mean by this, and how can we do this?
Okay, so when I was first getting into golf, the Aussie Tour was something like people, and back before even in the 80s and early 70s, the Australian Open was genuinely the fifth major.
Yes, it's true.
Like players used to come out from everywhere, and if you hadn't won the Australian Open, and this is genuine, I know a lot of people don't believe this now because it kind of feels like, respectfully, a bit of an Aussie Pro-Am to some degree, because it's hard to get a great field now. But I remember my uncle telling me stories, and I was like, what was the Australian Open like? And he was like, well, I remember Gary Player coming out during the time when there was trouble going on in South Africa. And there were he said there were thousands of people down the first hole at the Lakes. And, they were calling him names basically. And he hit it in the fairway trap. And then out of the fairway trap, while everyone was giving it to him, he hit it 2 inches. And they went from, giving him stick to cheering him on and loving him. So the story goes. But back in those times, it was actually a genuine thing.
It was huge. When Nicholas, Norman, Gary Player, everyone played in it.
Everyone played in it. Everyone came down. And so we've really had the Americanization of golf where they've created a wraparound season where there's no off season. So when I was coming through, IMG used to send Tiger Woods and all the future stars. Camilo came down when I was caddying for James. And it was the thing to do. And it was a pathway. And the Australian Open was something. And now I think that... and I'd like to hear everyone's comments on this. But I think there's a great opportunity now with the Live Tour and a few of the Aussie players being on it to bring the Australian Open back to fifth major status by linking it next to the Live event. So now you solve the Live players' world ranking point problems. You give Greg Norman a part in it, and I'm sure he would love that. And then you could maybe have 4 events. You could bring back the Aussie Masters, which used to be a huge event.
Yeah.
Seve used to come and play in that.
Yeah.
And you could make Greg Norman the commissioner or the chair of the event who presents the golden jacket. And if you gave Norman that recognition, I'm sure that would suit the Live players. So you could turn the PGA, you could bring back the Aussie Masters, and you could genuinely turn the Aussie Open into a huge major event and, speak to the general manager of the PIF. And I'm sure he would love to back an event like that. And imagine a $15 or $20 million purse on the Australian Open and all the Live guys playing it. And now they get world ranking points. And I think the crowds would be out back from the heyday,
We've also got the PGA though. So you got the PGA that they weren't aligned with Live back in the day. So until the PGA Tour aligned them. Now the PGA Tour, yeah, I get you. I hear you. But I think what the biggest killer was of the Aussie Tour is that South Summer was the PGA Tour decided to have a wraparound season, right?
Yeah, that's true.
That's what they're saying was took it out of it, right? Was the wraparound and just took a lot of it out there. But I like where you're going with it, Nick, as well. But one of the things I like about it is it's been affiliated with the European Tour, the DP World Tour, right? The Australian events, because that gets them a start. I think if you win the Order of Merit through those events, you get a start in the DP World Tour, right?
Yeah, I think it's the top 2 or 3, I believe.
And that's awesome. The thing that breaks my heart, Nick, is when people. I remember when Adam Scott won, the Aussie PGA and the Aussie Masters, and he nearly won the Aussie Open, and I think Woon John Lee might have ended up just taking it off him. I can't remember, but everyone's like, oh, it was so sad to see Adam Scott not win the Aussie Open. I'm like, hang on. Adam Scott's just jumped off on his private jet to go home. Don't worry about Scotty.
Yeah, he'll be fine.
I was like, my mate just made the cut for the first time, made $2,500. Now he can get a hire car next week in
Yeah.
Victoria. How about you cheer him on? You know,
Right.
so I kind of like that aspect side of it. But I hear what you're saying about the Aussie tour. It's a real shame because once you lose something like that, Nick, it's really hard to get back, like that stature, I believe. Because I've heard many stories around the Aussie events back in the day. Like Mr. Gary Player is a honorary member at Manly Golf Club when I was there.
Oh,
And he would still send, this is Gary Player, right? People listening to this. We had a member there named, he was an old Navy or Army guy, right? Brendan, I can't remember his last name, right? But he was in his 90s. He got into his 90s. And Gary Player every year would send him a birthday card to the golf pro shop and I'd give it to him. Unbelievable,
Wow.
right? It was so
Yeah.
nice. And he'd call him, what did he call him? He called him not superhuman, but along those lines, right, of just an amazing. And he used to watch Gary Player go around and he said Gary Player had this plugged bunker lie in this part 3, and he went up to him and said, oh, Mr. Player, that's a very unlucky break that you have there. And Mr. Player said something like, don't worry, I got this, and then hold it. And Brendan still says, like, as a little boy watching Gary play, not a little boy, he would have been old too, went around and watched him. So it's the best golf shot he's ever seen, and no one believes him because he's the only one watching him. He says, like, he hold this plug bunker shot.
wow.
Like, and anyways, but that was really cool story, like to be surrounded by those guys, and it was great for golf in Australia.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know what your take on it is. I don't understand the inner workings of the PGA and how they work, but I really believe there is an opportunity there.
I like
and
it.
maybe I'm I'm a bit of an idealist. Like I like to, and people have told me that over the years. Oh, you're in fantasy land Nick, too often.
I
But
like it.
no, I think that if you had that, and you had, even if it was just 2 events, even if it was just the Live event and the Aussie Open and the PGA, and then you had them back to back, it serves the Live players because now they can get world ranking points, and if all of them play, it massively boosts the event. And yeah, I really believe you'd have the thing sold out, and I think now that they've made an agreement with the PGA Tour, it seems, and the Live guys aren't, the baddies anymore for whatever reason. I think that opportunity is there, and and I think Greg Norman is, I've never met the man personally. Behind the scenes, people speak ill of the man, but I never met him personally. But he's done so much for Australian golf, and he was really the first world's branded player, like the Shark, and he was big in the Masters. The Australian Masters was a big event.
Yeah.
I think he owned that event. And yeah, so that's what I see, and I would love, and also too because I have friends that are on the Aussie tour, and there's not really much of an opportunity. But if an event was played at one of those, a tricky sandbelt course, the Aussie players actually have a chance if they have their week.
Yeah. But the one thing on the world ranking points, right, is it has to have a lot of other world ranking points players in there to be of any suffice because, for like, say, someone like Cameron Smith teeing it up in it, he has to win it or he probably loses points. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I saw that at the PGA. He only got 10 points for winning the Aussie PGA.
yeah. So you kind of got to be like, it's a risk as well involved if you're chasing points. It's a risk for these top guys. But man, I like it. I like your passion around the Aussie Tour. I loved it. Like I remember Channel 7 afternoons, watching guys like James Nitties, get it around. And, we could, safe to say, James Nitties has got a unique golf swing. Would you agree, Nick?
Yeah, he does, but it works.
It works, of course, mate.
He's, like if I had to choose someone to hit a cut around a tree close, James would be right up there. And he used to have this trusty 3-wood. It was a Callaway I might be getting this wrong, but I think it was a Callaway steelhead or original Callaway steelhead with a steel shaft. And if you wanted someone to hit the fairway, you'd give them that 3-wood, and almost certainly
Callaway Steelhead.
Yeah,
Freaking great club.
it was a great 3-wood. I bet
You
you
know,
he's still got it.
I had one for ages, and then I was just like this. I'm never giving this 3-wood up for the rest of my life. And then I actually hit a new 3-wood, and I was like, I hit it 30 past my steelhead. And I was like, oh, it's time to go. It's time to go. Like, I played with a guy once, and I was keeping up with him all day, and I hit like, you know, driver, irons, the same. And then all of a sudden, I hit this 3-wood, and I was like, what? What was that? And he's like, oh, it's this new TaylorMade RBZ thing or something, white thing. I was like, man, I've got to get my hands on one of those. And I did. I called the rep by the end of that hole and bought one. But anyways. Hey, Nick, all right, tell me, what's your favourite takeaway?
From today?
No, your favourite food.
Oh,
Fast
takeaway
food. Takeaway food.
You know what? I hadn't eaten a pizza for like I would say 3 years.
What?
And yeah, I have a gluten intolerance, and I was having some gut issues. And man, I had my first pizza in 2 years, a couple of weeks back, and it was like heaven. Like I sat in my mate's shop, who's like next door to the pizza shop, watching the footy, eating like a meat lover's pizza. My family aren't going to believe this because they know I'm a health freak, but you know, it was one of the best experiences of this year.
That's so good. I have pizza every Friday night. Every Friday night, pizza's night. But it's funny when people talk about gluten intolerance, right? People will say to me, like, I'll often order a gluten-free base, right? And people say, why'd you do that? And I was like, why do you eat gluten? Like, people say it's like, you're intolerant to it? I'm like, I'd just rather not eat it. If I can, you know what I mean? It's
not the best thing in the world for you, unfortunately.
No, not at all. All right, pizza. All right, tell me, if you had to, you know, pick your favourite 4-ball, but they can't be golfers, who would you play with?
Oh my God, that is an amazing question.
You can take your time. Take your time.
Bobby Fischer.
Who's Bobby Fischer?
Bobby Fischer was a legendary chess player who was really misunderstood and treated very poorly. But essentially in the chess world, the Russians owned chess for many years.
Mm.
So when there was the pressure between the United States and the Soviet Union wanted to prove their intellectual might against the West. So they pumped all this money into chess, and they had kids doing chess schools from young age and whatever, and no one could touch them. And this abandoned kid from America who, you know, pretty much grew up without a dad, who had a lot of trauma, put his mind to chess, and he was a child prodigy. And there was, you know, he went to, he basically represented the Western world against the might of the Russian power. And amazing story, went over and won the World Chess Championship against the champion. They've made a movie on it, and there's a great documentary on it. He lost his mind a little bit towards the end because those type of people, kind of like a bit of a Mo Norman type, misunderstood, and seemed like a brilliant mind. I'm not sure he'd be that social with me, but I recently watched his documentary, and I just was like fascinated by him as a person and his journey of life, and to me, to face the Russian might, and he did it practically all by himself, and just destroyed like everyone in the world of chess. So that'd be one.
There was a big controversy recently in the chess world, wasn't there? There's people, they often think that there's X amount of people who are cheating, right? Like got earpieces in, or they know certain things.
Yeah, there was a story about they're like, well, he's got beads in his backside. And there were accusations against a player who played Magnus Carlsen, and he played like a perfect game, and he was playing 100% perfect. And so there was a lawsuit brought against Magnus, and it's been thrown out of court recently, I believe. But there's a fair bit that goes on.
It's great. The chess world, it's narky out there. It's narky.
Yeah, I've only recently got into it, but I'm very interested in people that had self mastery and how they did it, and I like to
Mm,
study those characters and see what I can learn from them.
interesting.
One of my greatest teachers told me that the more fields that you learn in, the better you become at your craft because you can see things from multiple dimensions. So I'm very interested in people who have that level of self mastery and how they did it and why. And I really try to study them and learn something from them, and am intrigued by someone like that.
Yeah, I love studying like the best of the best. Like not studying as such. Like I'll learn and watch documentaries or YouTube videos on like Muhammad Ali or Kelly Slater
Yeah.
or Greg Norman. You know, just these guys are just dominating. You know, Mr. Beast from YouTube. Like just crazy stuff out there. All right, who's your second? Who's in? Who else is
Well,
in?
you just mentioned it. It's Muhammad Ali. I loved him as a
Wow.
kid. Yeah, fantastic. And not and the thing about I love about him is he's like extremely principled person. Where they literally took his world title off him because he wouldn't go to fight in Vietnam, and the
Wow.
guy just held to his principles. And I find that, you know, amicable. Like what's the word? You know, just
Inspiring.
amazing. Yeah, extremely inspiring because
Mm.
most people would sell out in that thing and go, well, you know, I'm the world champion. I da 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 da. But no, he was an extremely principled person, and also how much social mastery the man had. Like he would be interviewed on topics and the poetry and how he would be
Mm.
interviewed and how he would speak in interviews and how he would inspire the black people at those times. And how good he was actually at mind games as well. Like the
Yeah.
psychological warfare he put on his opponents was unbelievable. Like if you watch the story of the Rumble
Rumble
in
in
the
the Jungle
Jungle, and
in Manila, right?
yeah, Thriller and all that stuff, and the way it was just like, to me, that is what I call social mastery, and he really had the social world mastered. Like he had it down.
It's funny you say that, the thrill of like Manila, because we're looking at going to Philippines for a couple of months next year, and talking to my mother-in-law, and she's always freaking out because I go to India or islands off in Indonesia, and take the kids. And why are you going to Philippines for? I was like, we're not going to Manila. It's like not the Thriller in Manila, like we're flying in there, but we're getting out. And I only said that too on the weekend. All right, who's your and to tell you one thing on Muhammad Ali, and he was a poet, right? He could have been a rapper. He could have easily been a rapper, like a musician for sure. The way that the way he had with words, and he would just drop some rhymes down on the spot, like in interviews, like just go off on a tangent. He was, an incredible man.
Yeah, I loved him a
All
lot.
right, who's the last player? Oh no, what do we got? One more.
One more person through all of history?
Anyone you want.
Anyone? Maybe Socrates.
Who's that?
He's a Greek philosopher from ancient Greece.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So what have you got? You got a Greek philosopher, a chess player, Muhammad Ali.
Muhammad Ali, yeah, that's my.
You got a putting lesson using a mirror on the putting green, eating a meat lover's pizza, having a round of golf. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not a bad day. You've had your best day of your life. You had your best day of the year eating a meat lover's pizza, and now you're playing a round of golf with Muhammad Ali, a Greek philosopher and a professional chess player. That's some unique people in one group. I'll give you that. Most people go with like a comedian or something, or something along these lines, But I love it. I love it. Hey Nick, you got anything else you want to add, mate, to the podcast? Anything you want to
Oh, I
share
think
to the people?
there was I wanted your opinion on should we make the ball spin more?
I saw that, and well, I think the PGA Tour have knocked on the head. They said they're not going to accept anything happening to the ball.
Right, so they've torpedoed it.
Jay Monahan put out a request saying we will not be following any RA stuff. I think he's just saying the players said that, and he's not he's not going against the players again. Like if the players want to have an
I wouldn't
orange
be
juice with
feeling.
mandarin in it, he's giving it to them.
Yeah, I wouldn't. If it was Happy Gilmore, I wouldn't be him feeling too comfortable being him walking to the car park. Because if you had that tall dude as a fan of some of
Yes.
the players, you'd be in some trouble, Mr. Monahan.
The ball spinning right, Nick. It's a very good question, but it's probably prior my age group as well, because I wasn't really around. Like, I didn't play much good golf with the Bellata or these tour professional type of stuff. I was pretty quickly into the Pro Vs, I guess, in my career. So I haven't got a whole lot of experience to kind of share in regards to the ball. What's your thoughts?
My thoughts are this: I am a bit of a traditionalist in the way that I think about the game, and I really personally love watching golf when par is a really good measure,
Yeah.
and when the bombers kind of aren't favourites. So like this British Open for me was so beautiful to watch, and I think that the commentators underrepped the skill that Harmon had. Like that, to me, was an absolute show of skill and mastery in the way he controlled himself and the way he putted. And he's not a bomber, but he played to his strengths and he controlled it. Now, my issue is a lot of courses you can't keep putting the tees further back, and so old courses like Royal Sydney, New South, pretty much like with the new ball, to a lot of these guys. Like if you give Rory a ball that spins more, it's going to affect him a lot, but to the amateur, it's not going to affect him that much.
Yeah.
But I remember I was a member at the Lakes. I was when I was young, and Sergio came out. I think it was the Greg Norman Holt International where him and Badley went at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the 11th hole there, back in the day, to like hit it on two into that hole was like unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I think there were only a handful of players that could do it. I think Elk was one. But I remember watching Sergio there, and we were using Bellatas then, and the Pro V1 had just come out, but, the average golfer hadn't had them. And I think he hit driver 3-iron in there. And I was just like, this guy's playing a different game. I couldn't really understand it because I'd never seen anything like that. And that hole was a genuine par 5. Like,
Yeah, the 11th hole at the Lakes Golf Club, people listening, goes all the way around to the right. It's a quite intimidating hole as well. It's a
yeah,
great hole, a very iconic hole.
it's 528 off the back meters, and you have to have the right wind conditions. And if you were going to go for it to 2, you had to hug the right side, and the water comes into play. But after that ball came out, my friends in the day that I played with were Jason King and Ewan Porter. They started to do it on the regular. And then I started to watch them do it, and then I started to do it. But the ball really made that change that hole.
Wow. That's an
Like,
interesting viewpoint. It's
and
interesting.
also, yeah, like the first hole at the Lakes, it's probably now it's probably 255, 260 meter carry to get over the water from the back. And
Yeah.
you could just, like, those guys could just blow it over that. Whereas if you had a ball that spin more, that hole now would be like the water's in play, man. Like,
Especially into Royal Sadley or something.
yeah, 100%. And so a lot of the skill in the game back then, and that's why Gary's players were so good, was because they could control the spin. Like when I first watched Lonard, I'd never seen someone just like control the spin on the ball as much. But now with the ball and the technology and the equipment, they can just put you on track, man. I've seen it, like plug in this shaft, that shaft, make this adjustment, and all of a sudden they're hitting ideal spin rates.
Yeah.
But if you were, hitting too down on it or whatever, that ball just balloons in the wind. And you also had to shape the ball. You had to shape the ball against the wind in a strong crosswind when the ball spun more. Otherwise, if you got it spinning the wrong way, especially on tough courses, you could have heaps. So the variance in the scores would mean there would be a bit more skill in it. This is my personal view, and
Interesting.
you'd see guys like Harmon compete more, and you'd see guys that have a little bit more control, like the Kisners and that, and it would bring those guys back into the game. But my personal opinion is a lot of the majors are set up for the guys like Koepka and DeChambeau, who just bomb it, and they've got actions that are very good for the rough as well, because they shut it and they come in and they're very good and powerful at gouging it out. And so the other guys, it doesn't really bring the whole field in. So
Okay.
I love to watch golf when it's at courses like Royal Melbourne, Kingston Heath, and watching the President's Cup there, I was like, oh, ugh, it's like they're almost hitting it too far for that course now.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting. Yes, I think a lot of things have led to the ball going further. No doubt. Like it's a lot of things, but you notice a noticeable effect there in the ball itself, right? As soon as you saw a ball, people would start hitting at distances that never happened before. And that's such a great example that you've got there of the 11th holder at the Lakes, where all of a sudden people are hitting it, and you never seen anyone do that before, and it wasn't a new driver, or it wasn't a new exercise technique by all means, and it was just this ball jumped them up there. But I do think there are other facets to why golfers are better today as well. They're physically better. I think we can collect the data a lot better through 3D or TrackMan or whatever it is to help optimize each player to their performance. And you made an interesting point there around about how you can just fix a driver to match it. Well, back in the day, everyone had the same driver, and you had to
You had
use
to
it.
guess.
You had to use it a certain way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
crazy. Driver fittings. I've seen some Burko driver fittings, like crazy numbers stuff. Myself, I've had it done with Callaway. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's
That's
amazing what they've done with the technology, and I completely agree. Like the top players now are like monsters, and they're absolute warriors and athletes. Like you stand next to Finau or DJ, and you're just like, I'm like, man, when did you guys like become like the monsters from Space Jam? Like
they're all tall as. I
they're
know.
all,
I don't
those
remember the
guys
first
are
time.
monsters.
I remember the first time Aaron Badley walked past me. I was like, "Holy shit, you're massive!"
Yeah,
Like it's crazy. It's crazy. Oh, that's an interesting take on it. And yeah, no, I don't really have too much of a comment on it. But I do say one thing is that winding back technology, we have seen it. Like we have seen it in the swimsuits. We have seen them wind back in swimming. I think we've seen it potentially. I don't know if baseball bats were cheating when they had the metal on the baseball bats, but there has been some wind backs in some sport, but it's generally kind of frowned upon in regards to going against technology, going backwards. Do you know what I mean? Don't you think so, Nick? Like people looking at it going, why would we make it harder?
yeah, I understand that perspective for sure. But that's just my views and beliefs,
Oh,
and
of course.
I would
No.
like to see the game more competitive for more players and not so Americanized.
I agree. I agree. And Brian Harmon, hats off to him. What an amazing
What a
performance.
legend! What a
You
legend!
know,
Like absolute legend, and like people can learn a lot from watching that performance. You don't need to have Rory's power. He just played his game and his strategy. And again, your point earlier, like the guy putted the dots off it, and that'll get the job done. And he was absolutely stellar in his internal state, how he controlled himself, and how he remained at the same pace, and was copping shit about his waggles, I believe, and didn't let that affect him. And
what about when someone said to him from the crowd, "You don't have the balls for this, Brian"?
oh yeah, I heard that. Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. And he said that made him win.
I
And
think that's fantastic.
yeah, well, with some people's personal psychology, that's the worst thing you can do to them. Like if you're playing against them, like Tiger's like that.
Mm,
So remember when Tiger was going through swing changes, I think it was Stephen Ames in the World Match Play, and
God.
Stephen Ames in an interview was like, "Oh yeah, like he's not. I don't know, can't remember the word specifically, but he's not playing that great. He's off his game. I've got a chance." Da 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 da. And Tiger had that look in his eye and came out and beat him. I think it was something ridiculous, like 9 and
It was
7.
eight and seven or 9 and 7, something
Yeah, it was
stupid.
something ridiculous. And in the interview afterwards, he just goes, "Well, now he knows."
Yeah,
And
but I
so,
also think Stephen Ames was actually quite humble in it too. I think, I think there was a bit of humility in his interview after as well.
well, 100%.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like he
I'm just
was
saying
like,
that against a certain opponent with that
don't
type of
poke the bear.
psychology, if you think you're going to psych them out, you're actually doing them a favor because there's a spirit that exists in some people when you stick it to them like that. They're like, you know what? F you, I'll show you.
Yeah,
And some people have that psychology. And I have some students like that like, I'm like, oh yeah, yeah. This is a funny story, but one student in particular works like that. And I couldn't understand why like positive psychology wasn't working for him. You know, like I was like his cheerleader and whatever. And then I read a book called The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. He talked about reverse psychology in there. And I thought just it was like some pop psychology bullshit that doesn't work, whatever. And so I remember saying to this guy, like, yeah, like, and this was a thing I was prepared to do, like to lose him as a client. I was like, yeah, mate, I just don't think you got it in you. He's like, oh, what do you mean? I was like, I just don't think you're the type to get good at golf.
Oh, wow.
And then the guy, what did he do? He started practicing his ass off. He wanted to prove to me that he did have what it takes. And some people are like that. So, you know, when you're playing match play against someone, like, and they're that type of person, don't do those tricks because they will stick it to you. I've seen it.
I got stories like that myself as well. I got that in me. I've got that in me big time. Is don't tell me I can't fucking do something. It's just watch me, you know, watch me. And you know, my father told me at a very young age. He said, "Don't tell me what you can do. Show me what you can do." It's an old Sir Alex Ferguson quote, and
legendary.
And I kind of always gone off that, you know, just watch me. Hey Nick, it's been a lot of fun, mate. It's been a lot of fun. Hey,
I've loved it.
I'll put all the stuff in the show notes to get you for an online lesson as well. You know, kind of come see you in person, all that stuff below. You still got some availability for some online coaching?
Yeah, I do. I'm available on Skillist, and I'd love to see people on there and go on the journey. And if it feels right, reach out.
Love it. I love it. Hey, you've been great, Nick. Thanks for coming on, mate.
Thank you, Toby. Thank you for your time and thank you for the invitation. And I hope this has been insightful for the people listening and you've got something out of it.
It's been great. I'm sure it has.